Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the Bleav Network. And joining me to break down the Astros 24 draft is Kenny Van Doren, who co-hosts the Astros Future podcast. Always great to have Kenny on the show. Welcome back, Kenny. And we might as well start with first-round pick Walker Janek, the Sam Houston product. Local guy. Tell us about him, and did you like the pick?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to look at where the Astros have gone in recent years, going after some of those college bats, and you've seen the hands change at the top. You've seen three different GMs during this run for the Astros. You've seen different scouting directors. Of course, this is the first year with Derek Ladnier at the top, and then Cam Pandino, who's the scouting director, also in there. So two guys leading the draft with Dana Brown, who's very hands-on. We know that. We've read all those articles. We've heard him talk about it many of times at his previous positions too. He was one of the top guys for the drafts for the organizations he was with. But with Walker Janek, they mentioned that the Astros said, they saw him as the best catcher in the draft. There were conversations and, words out there that maybe they would go after a prep shortstop. And in my own opinion, I didn't think that was the best case, especially when you didn't have a second rounder. If you want to kind of hold on to the success you're having and continue to build with what you have at the top, you never draft on need. You draft on, the best available player, the best player that will succeed in your system. But they saw that with Walker Janek, and he grades out as one of the best catchers. He has a 60-grade arm, according to MLB Pipeline. So there's a lot to be excited about on the receiving end. You look back, wow, it's been 5 years now, but Corey Lee was taken in the first round at a Cal, and he was a catcher for the Astros. Didn't really turn out that well with the bat, but with Walker, it's like it's the all around. They like the bat. They like him as a catcher. He even played like a little bit of outfield, but I think that was just kind of based out of need, but he's been playing there since day one. Sam Houston raved about him as a person. We read that as well. So a lot to be excited about there with him. Maybe a little bit to improve on just on the receiving end. Just he frames really well, but just continue to be agile behind the plate like he's been doing. And maybe he'll continue to be a quick riser for the Astros like that you've seen with a lot of these college guys in the last year.
And the pronunciation is Janek, and I had it wrong. I knew I would screw some of these guys up. The general feeling in Major League Baseball draft is that you just take the best player available. But does taking a college catcher mean anything for Yainer Diaz? As you probably noticed, Kenny, they're Astros fans, maybe wondering a little bit about Yainer's defense at this point in the season.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the top of the system too. Signing Omar Narvaez when there was an injury to Victor Caratini kind of shows you where the depth is, kind of lacking it at the top of the system. And then behind that, you don't really have many guys in top 30s from Baseball America to MLB Pipeline to The Athletic. It's not like there's a lot of catchers in there. Miguel Palma's up there, but he's had his own struggles throwing the baseball, to second base, to third base, trying to gun down runners, but he's been raved as a receiver and kind of as a framer. He's got positive reviews there, but that's still something he has to work on. If you look at guys like Luke Berryhill, Ryan Robleski, they're at the top of the system right now. Ryan Robleski's on the IL, but I think it just kind of shows that there wasn't really much experience depth, just guys that were kind of ready for it. And I don't know if necessarily they drafted based on need, but looking towards the future, I mean, if he's going to be a guy that's a college bat coming into the system, we've seen him move quickly in the last year and a half, 2 years. So I think it's something that they needed a catcher now. Victor Caratini might not be around forever. I think it's a 2-year deal that he's on with the Astros right now. So, I mean, you always want to, have a trusted backstop. Sometimes defense comes first there, but it looks like he has all the tools to play. And for Yainer Diaz, I can't really speak on how he's been doing defensively now. He's kind of out of my reach, but you look at it, maybe there's a future at first base there as well. If Walker becomes that primary catcher in maybe 2 or 3 seasons, 1 or 2 seasons, just depending on what his timetable looks like for in development, but maybe there is an opportunity there for Yainer first, because I've read it before. I mean, there's been sometimes pitchers will, they favored Martin Maldonado for a couple seasons, and Yainer's still a young catcher in his second full season. So maybe there is an opportunity there for him to play a little bit more first base with. I mean, it's a pretty open position at the moment.
The next 3 picks that the Astros took, rounds 3 through 5, they didn't have a second round pick. They're all right-handed pitchers, all out of college. You think Dana Brown saw maybe the urgency in getting arms he can speed to the majors, considering the roster of injuries to his big league starters?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things where you kind of lean more on the need. I mean, there probably were college bats out there they liked, maybe some outfielders. Dakota Jordan was still on the board, and I saw his name linked quite a bit to the Astros early on. He's a 60-grade runner, 60-grade hitter, but he ended up with the Giants. But looking at those pitchers, Ryan Forsucci, who we found out Forsucci had a Tommy John surgery. So that's kind of plays into it that he's not going to pitch probably until late next season against talents, just depending on how that goes. But I've also, heard that there's positive reviews about how the Astros kind of have taken Tommy John surgery. Brian King, who reached the major leagues this year, when he was claimed, when he was taken in the Rule 5 draft by the Astros, he underwent Tommy John surgery a couple months prior, and he didn't pitch the season after he was claimed in the Rule 5. And he told me like he was like one of the best kind of experiences. They got him through it, and it was like kind of almost like the same shift. You bring in a guy who has Tommy John surgery, saw it a couple drafts ago with Colton Gordon, who's now at AAA for the Astros and a top 10 prospect by multiple outlets. So I think that's a positive thing right there. And I think that also kind of plays into maybe the money. We haven't seen the signing bonuses starting to drop a little bit, but if he does sign with the Astros, I think that could maybe play into a factor of, those discussions. We're not going to see you for a year because you're recovering from Tommy John surgery. We still want you to be here. I even remember I heard during those interviews too with the reporters that they saw him almost as like a first round talent before he had Tommy John surgery. So there's a lot to be excited about with him there. With Parker Smith, it's kind of interesting because the Astros jumped off the like ranked players by multiple outlets. I didn't see Parker Smith really ranked by many outlets, but he is a hometown kid, went to Bel Air, went to Rice, did something good there. I think I saw his fastball kind of ticks up into the like mid to late 90s. Yeah, he hit 96. The upper 80s changeup is probably a good look there as well. So I guess the Astros could be excited with him. And with Cole Hertzler, I don't really know as much about him. We've seen the Astros go into Liberty before, get Will Wagner. There was a family tie there, but ended up being a pretty good pick. But on the pitching side, he did a lot in relief. And I think when you can kind of see that, boil down into that they take some relievers that have multiple innings that have pitched as starters as well in this case, and they can kind of move them around and mold them back into starters. It's like one of those like player development dreams where you kind of get one of these guys a little bit raw and you can kind of mold them back into being a starter. And we've seen that multiple times. Tyler Guilfoyle, who's at AA right now, AJ Bluebaugh, who's at AAA, some guys who had more relief stints behind them.
You mentioned Parker Smith in the 4th round from Rice and Bel Air. Rice used to put out some really great pitchers. The problem was, Kenny, I don't know if you remember this, but Wayne Graham would kind of wear them down. By the time they were done with Rice, a lot of those guys just never were the same. They couldn't excel in the major leagues. They were kind of out of gas, but I assume that's not the case anymore with Parker.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just different now. I mean, Rice isn't, in my opinion, isn't really considered the baseball powerhouse that it once was. It hasn't been the best run for them recently. Maybe they'll turn it around. But yeah, I think it's just a little bit different. It's always hard to compare. Even like 2 years ago, the college landscape changes so much, especially with coaches and just the ways that they're developing. I want to throw out one more thing about the 3rd rounder, Ryan Fersucci, and this is just from someone within the organization, but the righty is a clean, repetitive delivery. That's what they kind of liked about him, with that quick arm action. His fastball has that late life. You can kind of see like that invisive fastball where it kind of rides at the end. And I think that's something they liked about him. They liked the slider. That seemed like his wipeout pitch, and changeup works against both hitters. You don't always see that. And they added a curveball. So I think that's something that maybe they'll start to toy with once he can start throwing again in the coming months and the next season. But they like him. They think he can be like top of the rotation stuff if he puts it all together. But the physical tools is really what drew them to take him in the 3rd round.
Just a general question. What have you learned about Dana Brown and the new front office from their first couple of drafts?
Yeah, it's different because a lot of the stuff under Click and Gross, it was, they saved money. You saw a lot of guys coming from Power 5 schools. They still dug their teeth into the NAIA, more like JUCO level, but even, lower level conferences where there's still really good pitching and really good players that you'll find. But they're kind of going, into these different conferences and find pitchers with, maybe the numbers don't read at the best. But there's something they like about it. There's something in the swing data. There's something in the pitching data that really just jumps off the page to them. Of course, you see a guy like Walker Janek, who wasn't Power 5 guy, but Sam Houston State has had its positive track record for baseball, and he just off the page. A lot of guys, he was going to be a late 1st round selection either way. It looked like. The Rangers took a catcher right after. So it just kind of looks like that. They look like they're going, aggressive route with a lot of these guys. I think that's something that you're seeing early on. I think it's a little bit harder to take some high school talent and want to develop them quickly. And I'm saying like premier high school guys. You guys like Chase Jaworski and Neomar Ochoa last season who were having pretty respectable seasons at single A. But they weren't top of the line guys like Ryan Clifford, who the Astros saved a lot of money up for in 2022 to grab. So I think it's just a little bit different there. They did save money. We can talk about maybe some of those high school guys later, but I think it's just more they're getting guys that they want to speed through the system. They want to get into their development plan quickly. And I think that's just a little bit different from what we've seen with James Click in recent years.
Quick reminder to our audience, let us know what you think of the Astros draft. Do you like how Dana Brown is building the farm system? Get in the comments and click the like button to support the show. If you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Kenny, who are a couple of your favorite draft picks we haven't mentioned as you go later in this draft?
Yeah, I think I kind of bounce around a little bit. I like Joseph Sullivan. I don't think he's really getting as much talk as he should be. He's the grandson of Patrick Sullivan. He was an NFL quarterback. He also won the Heisman. So there's a lot of athleticism in that family. The slugging looked good in college, 531. But he also has had those like hamate injuries, which is in the wrist and the hand, where you've seen a couple of Astros have it. Zach Daniels broke it recent years. Same with Will Wagner this time last season with it. So I think it's probably good that he just got that out of the way. It's a pretty brutal injury because it's not really out of your control when it happens, but it looks like he could be a strong center fielder kind of moving through the system. But I like that one. I think it's a little bit under the radar, but I think they saved a good amount of money taking some of these third-year college guys like him out of South Alabama. You kind of get into these other picks. I think round 10, I read that Ramsey David, who probably won't fetch too much money. He's a fourth-year senior at a college, but he is a part of like a program that I heard that at Southeastern University that they do throw flames. Like that was just something someone told me. Like they're just known that they can pick up velocity pretty quickly. So maybe the Astros kind of look to Ramsey David and try to build a little bit more velocity behind him, because I think he was in the 94, 95 range when I was reading up on him. So those are some of the guys on day 2 that like kind of stood out to me.
That was Pat Sullivan, the legendary Auburn quarterback. He's the father. I didn't know that. That's
grandfather. Yep. Joseph Sullivan.
Grandfather. Wow. Okay. So that's cool. That takes me to what I was going to mention to you is there a favorite factoid that you have from the Astros draft picks? I know my personal favorite name is kind of a tie. It's a toss up between 19th rounder Twine Palmer. That's a great name. And 20th round pick Kai McGarry. That's just a cool. I would love to have the name Kai McGarry. That's cool.
I don't know if you've seen Twine Palmer too, but I saw some photos of him today when I was looking up on him. He has a pretty cool mustache, a little bit of like a twist to it on the end. So he's got the look too to go with the name. Yeah. So, but another guy I just want to throw out there just quick was Caden Powell, JUCO guy, second year out of Oklahoma. That's Jim Stevenson territory, longtime scout for the Astros. And I mean, he knows his stuff, and he's gotten some good guys out of that Oklahoma area. So just someone to keep an eye on to see if he signed as well. He was a 6th rounder. But yeah, jumping into day 3, though, you talk about those names and just the factoids that stand out to me. Bryce Butcher from Oregon is, I think this is one of the coolest draft picks just like ever, like just kind of nerding out about, I've covered football at the same time. And I think this is just kind of a interesting pick all around, because he's going to go back this fall and play his last eligible season of football at Oregon. He just seems like a lunch pail guy, first guy in, last guy out, gym rat. Just watching his tape as a football player, he was a safety in high school. 247 had him as a 3-star. He walks on at Oregon, earns a scholarship, and played linebacker too. So it's a pretty cool story all around. And you've seen it before with guys like, I wouldn't want to lump him in with Kyler Murray. I think there's guys like that. I'm blanking on his name now. I'm not good with the NBA anymore, but there's a guy, I think, with the Bucks right now, and he played basketball at Notre Dame, and he played baseball, and he pitched for the Orioles, went back and played basketball. Like the Orioles weren't thinking, you're not going to go to the NBA, just go back, finish your basketball career, and come back and pitch for us. He never went back because I think it was not TJ McConnell, but one of those kind of like white guards that were from that era. But yeah, he did that. So it's like a similar thing, but he's going to go back. But this was something I got from the Astros, and it just someone around the team. But they graded him as one of the better center fielders in the country. And we know he won the award for, he was on like the Gold Glove for college players. They like the power and the eye, the contact for just his size is just kind of like this, like, I don't want to say brute because I feel like that kind of just comes off wrong, but I feel like he just run through a brick wall just watching him just play football. So is that kind of size, and the organization kind of sees like a diamond in the rough with this guy. I mean, once they get him, his at bats, get him up to speed, get him up to par with all the other guys. Once his football career is over, they probably have a good power speed option in center field in the minor leagues.
I assume they must love him because it's taking a chance of letting him go play football for another year.
And presumably, I assume that they'll sign him as well. We still haven't heard any official signings yet. I think we'll see that kind of trickle in the next few days.
The draft, it's only 20 rounds, not anywhere near as many as it used to be. And just to give fans an idea, if you go back in history, Roy Oswalt was a 23rd round pick. Dusty Baker was a 26th round pick. Keith Hernandez, the legendary first baseman for the Mets, was 42nd round pick. Mike Piazza, Hall of Famer, famously picked in the 62nd round. How important, Kenny, are undrafted players at this point in draft history? And did the Astros grab anybody that sticks out for you?
Just go down to Sugar Land. There's two relievers there that are knocking at the door of the major leagues. One of them was a 2024 non-roster invitee, and the other one is Logan Van Wy, who's been one of the quickest movers in the Astros system. He was the first guy from that 2022 class to reach AAA, and he was a UDFA. Like he didn't even get drafted, and so there's that kind of mix into it that you find these guys that can throw mid-90s and kind of just take a chance on them. The numbers don't look great. Logan Van Wy kind of threw from a funny arm slot. I remember they told the scout that they asked the Astro scout that was there. It was like other scouts were like, yeah, don't bother with this guy. And now he's in AAA. Like, I mean, there's just things that the Astros find. There's things that all organizations find that just fits with them with these UDFA guys. And I think that's just where you kind of build out your farm system. And then I wouldn't say you get lucky, but you find those diamonds in the rough. You find like you strike gold with some of these guys. It's just low risk. I mean, there's low risk in signing UDFAs. Sometimes it doesn't really work out for position players because there's just so much that you have to maybe change or, develop in their swing in just such short time, since they are college guys mainly, and there's just not as much time to do it. But one of the guys that really stood out to me was Justin Trimble from UC Santa Barbara. The numbers don't jump off the page. 248 batting average, 380 on base percentage, 461 slug. 12 homers. When you look at those numbers, it's just like, is this guy really going to hit at the pro level? You see the guys you usually see are hitting 360, and they're being taken in round 13 sometimes, like Tommy Sacco a couple years ago in the 2022 draft. So I'm kind of rambling on here, but when I looked into it, I was like, okay, maybe they like him as a defender, but I was like, why would they kind of just wait, to take a glove guy? But he plays third base well, and the Astros, they really like just the raw power and the exit velocities, just stuff you can't see on a box scores, things you can't see when you look at these guys' player pages. They think he can generate a lot of contact from the left side if they just change up his swing a little bit. And if he can do that, maybe he'll stick at third base, kind of moving through the system. So I think that's the one guy that kind of really stood out to me.
I'm glad you mentioned Logan. I'm a big fan because he's from Joplin, Missouri. That's where my mom was born and raised. And I went to school at Missouri Southern up there for a couple of years before I went to the University of Missouri, and that's where he went to school. So I'm really rooting for Logan. I want to ask you, from a big picture standpoint with the Astros, are there a couple of guys that have emerged this season from their minor league system that fans might want to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, you're saying more of like guys that still have not reached the major leagues? Because
sure, yeah. We know the Jake Bloss story, and yeah. I know how much he's emerged, obviously.
Yeah, so I think easy guys like Jake Bloss, Joey Loperfido have made those jumps, but Shea Whitcomb just continues to just develop pretty quietly the last couple of years. I think I've kind of chronicled the last 2 or 3 seasons for him, but in 2021, he played all around good baseball. 2022, got to AA, wasn't really hitting that well, but he was improving his defense. Greg Kessinger is a really good friend of his, and almost like a mini mentor, even though they are in similar age groups. But he looked up to Gray a lot about the versatility and the ability to play multiple positions. And Shea's also good friends with Mike Ramazzotti, who's the infield coordinator for the Astros, who was a development coach at High A not too long ago. So, he works with him in the offseason. And then in 2023, you see the power come along. He gets to AAA. He's playing at some of these other AAA parks, tied for the most home runs in the minor league baseball, wins the Joe Bauman Award, what's the most homers in minor league baseball. And then this season, it just all comes together. The 2-strike approach has been immaculate for him. I think that's where he's really thrived. To talk to him about it a little bit when I was down there in Sugar Land, and he was like, I just feel like once it comes to 2 strikes, he kind of just hones in, and that's where he kind of makes his contact or just makes his damage. And at one point, his OPS was over 800 in that. I think it's maybe a little bit lower, like 790, but still, like on the season, he's hitting close to 300 with a 900 OPS. So all around good season. He's putting it all together. I don't necessarily know if his future is at shortstop, but he's really developed as an infielder. Maybe he just kind of sticks around with those positions. I don't know if the outfield is still happening. That was more of a move that the Space Cowboys made because they needed outfielders. And he's played infield. They can put him out there, and he's talked about that with a shortstop that can play shortstop well. You can probably play other positions pretty well as well, just because the athleticism and the ability to play defense kind of mirrors and transitions to other positions. So I don't know if the outfield's still happening because Cooper Hummel's back down there. So they do have 3 true outfielders along with him and David Hensley. So we'll see how that one kind of plays out. But I do like what they've seen from him. AJ Bluebaugh, of course. It almost like, I think I made a joke to my friend. It's just someone I was talking to the other day that when Jake Bloss got called up and AJ had his next start, it was like he just pitched angry. Like he just I don't even know if that was the case, but just came out firing at one of his best AAA outings. He's knocking at the door too. And he's one guy that's probably a little bit more ready. I think the Eric Lauer experiment has kind of gone, back and forth a little bit. They kind of looked at him as, you've heard his name float around multiple times with the experience and being maybe a guy that they bring up, but AJ's doing the same thing. The cutter development has really gone well, and he's been able to kind of balance that with his fastball. And I wrote an article about it, but he was running into issues with some of the heat in Sugar Land, and so he couldn't get his velocity up. So relied on the cutter, and it worked really well. So I think that's one of those high IQ moves from him, and especially just from Cesar Salazar, who was his catcher that day.
Not many openings in the last few years for a position player, but a good possibility that Alex Bregman moves on. I mean, is there two guys that you would say look for them if there's a battle for that position next year?
Yeah, so it's a tough thing because maybe some of these guys that are playing well right now, they might be boosting trade stock at the same time. For a guy like Shea Whitcomb, I don't really know who else to kind of compare him to. I mean, Toro in 2021 started playing really well when the opportunities were open for him, and he was just kind of playing himself into a trade. But I don't necessarily know if that's the case for Shea. Maybe there's an opportunity that opens up that he can be a bench guy. But for right now, I think going into spring next year, you look at guys like Zach DeZenzo, Bryce Matthews, who I can probably confidently say if they're still with the organization, I have no idea how it'll shake up after the trade deadline. But assuming that they're still with the organization, they'll get invited to spring training. And those are two guys that will probably get some good looks at the hot corner if they didn't bring in a major league guy, if they didn't re-sign Alex Bregman. Shea Whitcomb probably in that conversation as well. For Will Wagner, I don't know necessarily. I don't know if he has the power to stick maybe at third because he can hit the crap out of the ball, just line drives, and he can hit for average a lot. But I think maybe he can just be best suited as a first baseman, second baseman, kind of move around the infield. I'll always love that one time. It was a pretty cool quote, but Mike Ramazzotti, who I mentioned earlier, called him the athletic Max Muncy. So there's that. He has that going for him.
I think fans know that Astros Future, it's the podcast to go to, the astrosfuture.com website. But our bosses over on the Bleav Network might want you to mention that you are doing a Bleav podcast, right?
That is correct. Yeah, I do a podcast called The Unwritten Rule. I started it at Mizzou in 2020, so it's been 4 years now. But we started on the radio, KCOU 88.1 FM. Graduated, didn't want to give it up. We talk about all Mizzou sports, but kind of throw in a little bit of everything. But it's very Mizzou focused, and I know you're a Mizzou guy, so maybe you can tune in one day. Maybe we'll have you on one day. But yeah, that's what we do. And I also wanted to apologize. I know I said last time I was on here, I didn't know how good Ronel Blanco was going to be. Proved me very wrong. That's why I'll stop talking about guys with major league experience. But it was a very, very good turnaround for him.
He proved to everybody. You're not the only one that lost that bet.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll hush up next time on those kind of things. But yeah, it's been a very good season for Ronel. I think he probably wanted to be an all-star, but I think you would take the kind of season that he's had. Anything else you want to plug? Yeah, you can just Astros Future podcast. We got an episode with Ryan Gusto coming out soon, who's another pitcher that's performing pretty well at AAA. So tune into that soon. And check out the Houston Sports Talk podcast. This everything you need. Look behind Rob right now. He's got Texans, Rockets, and Astros. Everything you need is here. Oh man, thanks a lot. And Ryan, you said Ryan Gusto. Ryans that are pitchers seem to be the Astros deal right now. How many did they draft that are named Ryan in this one? Yeah, you got Ryan Smith, Ryan Forsucci, and I thought there was a third one. Oh, yeah. Ryan Matheson in the 14th round. Yeah, you got 3 Ryans. Yeah. And Ryan Verdugo. How could I forget? Yeah, there's 4. Can't forget him. That's four guys. That's crazy. Yeah. It's on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, but it's at the Vandalorian on X. Find Kenny over there. I can't thank you enough for giving us a few more minutes on this one. And MIZ. ZOU.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.